I must have been about 13 years old when I went to visit my family in the country for the summer. I was a city kid. I had grown up my whole young life in the city. I loved it. There was always so many things to do in the city for a kid my age. Festivals, amusement parks, zoos, concerts. My parents were very social people who had made entertainment a family staple. I saw life as many would assume it to be for one of those TV show families, one great day after another. Summer vacation was about to start, and this year, I'd be visiting my cousins in the country. I'd been to visit them a few times before, during previous summers, but I never really cared for it too much. Too many bugs, spooky old houses, dark watered lakes. I did like the food though. My aunt always made the best meals, and there was always some kind of delicious dessert to go with it. My dad had insisted I go for a full summer this time, and not only that, but that I do it without them. I was getting older, and I guess this was his way of trying to toughen me up a bit. There's no better way to toughen up a young boy like country living, he would say. My dad grew up in a small town in the country and was always bragging and telling stories about his childhood. Fishing, swimming in ponds, hunting. You just don't know what you're missing, he'd tell me. Give me video games and roller coasters over that stuff any day. I reluctantly agreed to spend my summer with my cousins this time. I hadn't seen them in a while, and though I usually didn't have a good time when I went down there, I agreed to go anyway. My aunt and uncle had two boys, Jared and James. They were always amazed by all the things I got to do and see in the city. We'd always tried to get my aunt and uncle to bring them down for a summer, but for whatever reason, they never did. On the night I was packing, my dad came to my room and stood in my door. I'm really glad you're doing this. I know you really don't like the country, but I think it'll do you some good to experience a little of how I grew up. Your Uncle Robert and Aunt Kathy really want you to come down and visit the boys. James has been getting sick a lot lately, and he's been asking about you. Maybe you visiting him will make him feel a little better. I could see it really meant a lot to my dad, so I put on my best fake smile. It's okay, Dad. I'm excited to go. I just hope you recognize me when I get back from all that food I'll be eating. You know, Aunt Kathy loves to cook. I'm gonna be like 300 pounds when I get back. We both laughed, and when he left, my fake smile disappeared. It was gone. I thought about what he had said about James getting sick and asking about me. How would me going down there to visit him make him feel better? I mean, what was I, a doctor? I began to think about all the fun I'd be missing out on and having hear all my friends tell me about everything that they did during the summer while I was in the country, skipping rocks on ponds and counting trees. Ugh, I said to myself, suck it up, Timothy. It's just one summer. We got up early the next morning and hit the road. I asked my dad if we could stop at my favorite fast food restaurant. Luckily, he said yes. After we got our food, I made quick work of my meal. My mom turned around. You'd better enjoy that. You know, your aunt and uncle don't do fast food. Nothing but southern home-cooked meals for you. Lucky me, I said in my most sarcastic tone. The trip was long and boring. The further you get away from the city and the closer you get to the country, there's nothing to see but trees. I sat quietly in the back seat listening to my parents' mundane conversation. I was already missing the city. When we finally arrived in town, I noticed my dad didn't go the same way to my uncle's house. Hey, where are we going, Dad? Your Uncle Robert doesn't stay in the same place anymore. They've moved. As a matter of fact, they've already moved twice this year. Twice this year, my mom said? Why would they move twice in 1 year? Well, Robert says the first two houses had a mold problem. He thinks that's the reason why James has been getting sick. You know these old houses, bad insulation, and with the humidity, it can cause problems. My mom now looked concerned, as did I. Well, what about this new place? Is it safe? My mom asked. Well, he says it is. He had it checked out for mold and came back with a clean inspection. Plus, he says James has been getting better. I could tell my mom was still a little concerned, and so could my dad. Hey, don't worry, my dad said to the both of us. The house does not have mold. It's been checked out, and it's good. He wouldn't have invited you if it wasn't safe. Though my dad did his best to ensure us that everything was all right, it just didn't sit right with me. 2 houses in 1 year? Something wasn't right about that. When we arrived to my aunt and uncle's house, my feeling of unease didn't disappear. We pulled into the driveway only to see them all standing outside to greet us. Now, this normally would have been seen as a sweet, welcoming gesture, but it just didn't feel natural, and to be honest, it was a little weird. The house was old, as to be expected. It was 2 stories, and on somewhat of a small yard for a house this size. It looked as if it had just been thrown there, kind of out of place. We got out of the car and went to greet my aunt, uncle, and cousins. They looked different this time, especially from the last time I'd seen them. It'd been a while anyway, so I didn't think too much of it. I did notice they all looked tired, sort of drained. "Hey, how y'all doing?" my Aunt Kathy said, reaching out to give hugs and kisses. My dad and Uncle Robert gave each other big bear hugs and patted each other firmly on the backs. I went to hug my cousins, and I saw how sickly James, the youngest boy, looked. He looked pale and skinny. I tried to act like I didn't notice, and I hugged his brother Jared first. Jared was a couple of years older than me, and James was about 1.5 years younger than I was. As I got around to hugging James, he felt small and frail in my arms. It made me uncomfortable. James had always been a little chubby. I did my best to ignore it. "Tim, go get your stuff out of the car," my dad told me. I let go of my cousin and looked at him. He was looking at me right in my eyes. He looked as if a cure was standing in front of him. My older cousin Jared walked me to the car. "Hey, what's wrong with James?" I whispered. Jared didn't take his eyes off the ground. "Mold. He got sick from all that mold in the other houses." Now, I had heard of people getting sick from mold before, but it usually just resulted in respiratory issues. James looked like he was dying. "Was it in both houses?" I asked. "Yeah, it was pretty bad, but he's doing better now. But anyway, hey, I'm glad you're here, cousin. We're gonna have some fun this summer, city boy." Jared's words made me feel a little better, but I thought about what he had said about James doing better. If this is what he looks like doing better, I'd hate to see what he looked like before. We walked back to the house, and I could see my parents engaged in conversation with my aunt and uncle. But both my aunt and uncle and James were just staring at me. Something felt off. I had the feeling I was in for a weird summer. As we walked into the house, the first thing I noticed was a sour, musty smell. My cousins began looking around the house as if they were looking for someone. "Hey, what's that smell, Robert?" my dad asked. "Ah, man, you know these old houses. I think there's some still water under the house from last time it rained. I'm gonna have to get somebody out here to drain it." His answer was believable, but it didn't explain the reason my cousins were looking around the house the way they were. "What are you looking for?" I asked Jared. "Huh? Oh, nothing," he said with a nervous smile. What's going on? Why are they acting so strange? I thought to myself. As we walked to the kitchen for snacks and coffee, I noticed as we left the living room, that nasty smell disappeared. Maybe the water was just under that part of the house, I thought. When my parents were done with cake and coffee, my aunt and uncle walked into the door. "Hey, you didn't even give us a tour of the new place," my dad said. "Oh, it's a mess right now. We aren't even finished unpacking. Let us get it together first," my aunt said. "Well, Tim, you have a good time while you're here." "I will, Mom." I did my best to look happy. "All right, son. We'll see you in a couple of months," my dad said, grabbing my head and shaking it playfully. I watched as my parents said their goodbyes and left, wishing I was going with them. I didn't want to be here. I just had a bad feeling. I didn't know what it was. It was already kind of late, as we had gotten there later in the day. I was tired from the long trip. We hung out for a little bit, then prepared to go to bed. My aunt and uncle had prepared an air mattress for me in Jared's room. I took my stuff upstairs and changed while everybody got ready for bed. While in the restroom brushing my teeth, I noticed that foul, musty smell had come back, which was odd because the boys' rooms were upstairs. Why was I smelling it up here if the still water was downstairs under the living room floor? It smelled strong, and I actually felt a little nauseous because of it. I looked up in the mirror and was startled by James standing right behind me in the hallway. He was just staring at me. He looked at me as if I had something he wanted. "Hey, James, you okay?" I asked. "Yeah, just glad you're here, that's all." He turned and went to his room. I finished up and went to Jared's room and got on the mattress. Man, James is acting weird. He was just staring at me in the bathroom just now. Well, what do you expect? He's been sick. My cousin snapped at me. "Oh, sorry, Jared, I didn't mean..." "Hey, don't worry about it." He cut me off. "It's just been a little rough around here lately, with all the moving and James being sick all the time. I didn't mean to snap at you. I'm just tired. Hey, good night, Tim. We'll see you in the morning, okay?" He turned around and cut off the lamp. I lay there in the dark, hoping this day wasn't what the rest of the summer was going to be like. I closed my eyes, waiting to wake up for a better day. I woke up in the middle of the night. I had to pee. The house was so quiet. Houses in the country are a lot quieter than houses and apartments in the city. There's no sounds, no cars passing, no sirens, no sounds of life, just dead silence. It made me uncomfortable. I got up to go to the restroom. There was no way I was going to be able to hold it till the morning. The musty smell was gone. I was relieved. But on the way back to the room, I heard someone moving around downstairs. I looked around the corner downstairs, but it was too dark to see anything. It sounded like someone moving back and forth. My uncle must be looking for something, I thought. Then, a loud bump. He must have stomped his toe on something. I was about to laugh. Then, a deep, breathy growl came from downstairs in the dark. I backed up and got back to the air mattress and under the covers. What was that? I thought to myself. Had my uncle hurt himself? It was quiet again, and eventually, I fell asleep. The next morning I woke up, I could smell food cooking. Jared was still asleep, excited about one of my aunt's big country breakfasts. I went downstairs to see what she was making. "Good morning, early bird," my aunt said. "I see you're not like your cousins. I basically have to drag them out of bed. Good morning, Aunt Kathy. What are you cooking? It smells really good. Omelets, grits, bacon, and honey biscuits." I almost drooled at the sound of this. "Is Uncle Robert okay?" She turned and looked confused. "I heard him down here last night. Sounded like he was looking for something. Sounded like he may have bumped into something and hurt himself. Is he okay?" "Honey, your Uncle Robert sleeps like a heavy stone. When that man lays down, he ain't getting up. And I would know, 'cause I'm a light sleeper. This is an old house. At night, when it cools off, the house settles in and it makes noises. Don't you worry none, it's natural." I didn't bring it up again, but I knew what I heard definitely was not the sound of stretching boards or an old floor settling into place. Not long after, everyone else was up and we all had breakfast together. My aunt and uncle said they had taken the entire first week of summer off so they could spend time with us and do things with us. While eating, no one hardly said a word, which was odd, because I'd always known them to be very talkative, lively people. They were different now. It seemed like the life had been sucked out of them. Every so often, I would catch them just staring at me, and when I did, they just awkwardly smile. "Well, I'm taking y'all for a picnic today," my uncle said. "Taking you to the lake. We can grill out there and we can swim to cool off. Water should be real nice right now." The boys and I became very excited and talked about all the games we would play in the water. Later that day, when we were leaving to go to the lake, while in the car, I couldn't help but notice James looking up at his bedroom window. He was staring at it very intently. I looked up at the window, but there was nothing there. But still, James just stared. "You okay, James? What are you looking at?" "He's fine," Jared answered for him. The look on his face was like he was hiding something. He didn't want James to answer for himself. I didn't say anything else, and my aunt and uncle didn't seem interested. We spent the entire day at the lake. When we got back to the house, we were all very tired, just wanted to shower and get to bed. It had been a good day, and I was feeling better about being there. Jared, James, and I talked for a while until the three of us were almost passing out. James went to his room, and Jared turned off the lamp, and we went to sleep. It was the middle of the night, and I was wakened by a sound downstairs. There was movement again, but this time I could hear someone coming up the stairs. Up and down the stairs they walked. This happened about 3 times before they came up the stairs and didn't go back down. Jared, I whispered. My cousin placed his fingers over his lips, turned around, faced the wall, and covered his head with the covers. I heard heavy footsteps going down the hall towards James's room. I could hear his door slowly creak open, then silence. Then, the footsteps began coming down the hall to our room. I pulled the covers over my head and peeked through a small opening to see. As the footsteps got closer, I could smell that foul, musty odor enter the room. I watched and waited, hoping it was just my uncle, but it wasn't him. I saw a tall, dark shadow come into the doorway. It was bigger than my uncle and almost as tall as the door. I was frozen in fear, terrified at the sight of whatever this thing was. The smell was so strong and thick. Over and over, it made an odd twitching motion that scared me so bad I couldn't bear to look at it anymore. I closed my eyes tightly and tried not to make a sound. Everything was so quiet, deathly quiet. I forced myself to open my eyes again. It was gone, and the smell was gone with it. It must have taken me about 2 hours to fall back asleep that night. Next morning when I woke up, I immediately woke up James. "Hey, what was that thing? You knew it was coming. What is it?" Jared just stared at me for a moment, then sat up. "Well," I said, waiting for his answer. "It lives here too." "What are you talking about? What do you mean it lives here?" "The shadow thing," my cousin said. "It lives here with us." I didn't understand. "So you all knew about this thing?" Jared took a deep breath. "Look, I'm not supposed to talk about it, but it's the reason we kept moving. It's the reason why James has been getting sick. It follows us." I'd never seen my cousin look so sad. "Well, what is it?" I asked. "I don't know." It all started back at the old house. The man told my dad that nobody had lived there for a really long time because there was something wrong with it. But it was so cheap, we moved in anyway. Well, not long after, we started seeing it, and James started getting sick. People said there used to be this mean old man that used to live there, that used to own the place. Said he went missing. It was a rumor that his own son killed him and buried him somewhere on the property. His son's name was James. It's been following us ever since. Jared, why was I invited here for the summer if you all knew this thing was here? Jared looked down and didn't say anything. "Hey, why did you invite me?" "We need you." "What do you mean you need me?" I was growing aggravated. "What do you mean you need me? What does that mean?" Jared looked at me and asked, "Tim, what's your middle name?" My mind had gone blank. I couldn't even remember my own middle name. "James. My middle name is James." I felt flush, so I went to the bathroom to run cold water over my face. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I looked pale and dark around the eyes. I ran downstairs. My aunt, uncle, and James were in the kitchen. I looked at them, then I looked at James. He looked better. He looked healthier. Jared came down and stood right behind me. "You told him, didn't you?" my aunt said. "You knew about this?" My aunt casually took a sip of her coffee. "Timothy, you're gonna be all right. We just needed to take a little bit from you, that's all. James is too weak to feed it anymore. Feed it? What do you mean, feed it? My uncle spoke up. Look, Tim, sometimes you come across things in these old houses you're not supposed to bother. Well, we bothered something. But if you help us, we can get it to leave us alone. Now, you don't want James to die, do you? I mean, just look at him. You've only been here 2 days and look how much better he looks. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So you want me to die so James can live? Oh, Tim, you're not gonna die, my aunt said. It'll just be like you have a bad cold, and then you'll get better. Now, come on here. Have something to eat. You're gonna need your strength. The whole day, I walked around in a daze, horrified that my family was feeding me to this demon, or whatever it was. When they were all outside in the backyard, I snuck and called my parents. I told them that I wasn't feeling well and that Jared and I weren't getting along. I couldn't tell them the truth. They'd never believe me. But my dad refused to come. He said that I was just being a spoiled city brat and that he wouldn't be coming until the end of the summer. I'd be dead by then, I thought. I cried and I begged. I didn't care how I sounded. I just wanted them to come and get me. But he said no and hung up the phone. And that was it. I was doomed. I was to be a sacrifice and there was nothing I could do about it. I was amazed by how normal my family was acting despite me, despite my sadness. They seemed joyful. They just ignored me. I sat by myself the rest of the day and dreaded the sight of the disappearing sun and the coming night. At bedtime, I laid there on the air mattress and waited for the thing to come to kill me. I cried alone down there on the floor. My cousin completely ignored me and just went to sleep. And eventually, somehow, I did too. I was awakened by the sound of tapping on the dresser drawer. It sounded like someone tapping their fingernails on it. I reluctantly looked over, but there was nothing there. The sound had stopped. I turned around, and there it was, the shadow thing. It was standing right over me. The thick black mass stood there silent, and it didn't move. It had made no sound this time. It just appeared. It was slightly bent over, as if it were looking me over. I slowly pulled the covers over my head. I had never experienced such fear in my life. I was hoping it would just go away, but I could feel its presence. I knew it was still there. The foul, musty smell permeated the room. Then I felt the cover on my shoulder start to press in, followed by a soft touch on my shoulder. I felt pressure on my back. I began shaking and weeping uncontrollably. I was lifted off the air mattress and thrown completely off of it like a rag doll. I grabbed my cover as it was the only thing I had to shield myself from the thing. It stood there motionlessly in the middle of the room. It started to shake. It started to move towards me. Its shape seemed to expand and stretch. I screamed, "No!" and closed my eyes. I opened them after a couple of seconds. It was gone, and the smell had faded. I jumped up and turned on the light, and Jared sat up in bed. "Stop fighting it, Tim! You're crazy! You're all crazy," I said. I began packing my stuff. "Where are you going?" my cousin said. "I'm leaving. I'm not staying in this house one more minute. I'm not going to stay here so that thing can kill me. Mom! Dad!" Jared yelled. They all came rushing into the room. "Timothy, where are you going?" "I'm leaving. I'm not staying here." "Oh, really? And just where do you think you're going this time of night?" My aunt was right. I had nowhere to go. But I would rather stay in a tree than spend one more minute in that house. "I don't know, but I'm leaving." I pushed past them and went downstairs. "Get him," my aunt said. My uncle quickly made his way downstairs and grabbed me. "Come on, Tim, let's talk about this." They all gathered around me and began trying to talk me out of leaving. The sound of loud footsteps began again upstairs, pacing back and forth. Then we heard the sound of the air mattress being moved across the floor, followed by it being thrown against the wall. The thing was angry. I ran for the door. Jared tried to stop me, but I pushed past him. I opened the door, and there in the doorway stood my parents. They had come to pick me up. I grabbed them and cried. I held them tightly and began to pull them towards the car. "Please, let's just go now." My parents looked at my aunt and uncle and asked what was going on, but I pulled them to the car. I was not about to let them go inside that house. When we got to the car, my parents asked what had happened, but I was too upset to talk about it. I looked back at the house to see my family standing outside, staring at me, just as they had when I'd first arrived. It was chilling. As we drove away, I looked up at Jared's room and saw someone standing in the window behind the curtains. I quickly looked away. Looking back at the house in the dark, I was so happy this nightmare was over, but I wondered if the shadow thing would follow me, just like it had James. I fell asleep on the ride back home. I told my parents about what happened that day, and to this day, I'm not completely sure if they believe me. But they know something bad happened to me those 3 days I was there. I had to go to therapy a lot after that experience, and slowly, I got better. I never saw that part of my family again, and my parents never mentioned them. That was 14 years ago, and to this day, I still have issues with shadows. Hello all, and thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you've liked this content, please click the like button, share, and subscribe to receive notifications for new dark stories. Until the next time, be good to each other. It's a scary world out there.